would be, if y'all haven't gotten this book, The Lost Light and Interpretation of the Ancient Scriptures, you should go ahead and get it. Different. They don't all look like this, is what I'm saying. Depending on publishers.
Mm-hmm.
Some publishers don't have this front on it. So, but the name of it, The Lost Light and Interpretation of the Ancient Scriptures. So let me read you this story. Alvin Boyd Kuhn, born in 1880 on a farm in Franklin County, Pennsylvania, Kuhn graduated from Princeton. He studied the Greek language, to which he later attributed great importance regarding his interest in theology. Kuhn's graduation address was The Lyre of L-Y-R-E, Lyre of Orpheus. He focused on Jason and the Argonauts and the Golden Fleece. I mean, you know, when you look at all of these ancient stories, like the story of Cinderella, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, every bit of those stories and mythologies are hung on this astrological. I don't care which one you go back to, that you know, little kids' stories, little Cinderella, all the little stories, they're all on astrological mythology. So, Kuhn's graduation address, this speech he later felt would prime his interest in the Orphic mysteries. For the next 25 years, Kuhn was a high school teacher of foreign languages. In 1927, he enrolled in Columbia University, where in 1931 he received a PhD with his thesis on Theosophy, a modern revival of ancient wisdom. The first instance in which an individual has been permitted by any modern American or European university to obtain a doctorate with the thesis of Theosophy. No one ever before or since has done that, obtained their doctoral thesis on Theosophy. His major work, that's this book right here, this is considered his major work, but now he's got a lot of books that are this thick or bigger, 500, 600, 700 page books. His major work, The Lost Light, published in 1940, an exposition of the allegories, parables, and personages of biblical Christianity as having been extant in pre-Christian paganism under different forms and names. So what this book is about is how that the different characters in the Bible are drawn from these ancient mythologies. And he'll blow your mind, I promise you, he'll blow your mind. Having been extant in the pre-Christian paganism under different forms and names, was deemed by the chairman of the philosophy department of the Ohio University to be the greatest theological work to have occurred in the English language.
Wow.
That's this little book right here. And this little book, every Christian, every seminary, every place in the world that's going to try to produce a so-called preacher, it should be required that they read this book.
Yeah.
Before they ever get anywhere. It should be required, but anyway, it's not. So I want to draw from this book, and I want to say some things, and I closed out that we'd stopped on the we had stopped at a place right here. This is hell. I had stopped at a place, Inferno with F, Inferno. We have heard of that, and we have been told Inferno is a burning pit where fire is at. Comes from the Latin inverno, V-E-R-N-O, inverno, and actually it means to be frigid, to be cold. And it was referring to the winter, in which time things appear to be dead. And then we have heaven. So this is known as heaven, and this is known as hell. This is known as summer, this is known as winter, this is known as spirit, this is known as matter. Any of those are here. They're on this wheel, the wheel of astrology. So let me read you something from this book of Alvin Boyd Kuhn. Several little things I'd like to read to you out of this book. let's see here. This stuff is so interesting. Proclus, I'm not sure if you're not familiar with Proclus. Proclus was an author, he was a writer. Proclus advises us that the incarnating soul / ego. Now, you won't find a lot of teaching on this. You will find some hinting through Kuhn's work that the soul, ego are the same, or have the same characteristics. And the reason for that is the soul is a special design of spirit or God or source, whatever, for dimensional reality. What that means is just the spirit never changes. It's always spirit. Whether it's in you or out of you, it don't ever change. Spirit is light, life, and love, period. It doesn't change. If spirit is in Hitler, it's still light, life, and love. You know, it doesn't, if it's in a Mussolini, it doesn't change. It's still light, life, and love. But you say, people say, but how could those people be that corrupt or that wicked? They have that light, life, and love so deeply buried in their carnality or in their warped thinking. It's still there. And it's hard for us to give them that much credit to say, well, they do have a spark of that eternal flame inside them. They really do. They do. Their life may not appear to be that way, and it doesn't. And I do understand that. So, but the soul is designed so that the ego is that part of you that's physical, sensual, and that is not wrong. So we have the idea the ego, soul, only has 5 senses, when in reality it has 7 senses, just exactly like the stick man has 7 endocrine glands. The ego has 7 sensual beings, and I think we may have talked about it some last night. About 2 of those senses have been more or less dormant, and we've left them dormant since infancy. We haven't cultivated and developed them. And so whatever those 2 senses are, you know, instinct, intuition, different things that we could try to associate ourselves with, most of us have walked away from our instinctual and intuitional nature. Still there, because, I mean, haven't you ever now and you'll have an intuition, a really moment of thought, and it won't ever lead you astray. It's always right on target. If we learn to, it's sort of like the animal kingdom, they never lose that instinctual or intuition. You never will see a lamb or you just won't hardly ever see a lamb say, I think I'll go over and lay next to that tiger. Just make friends with him. Instinct tells him no, it's not advantageous for his health. That's an instinctual thing. That's an intuitional thing. So, Proclus advises us that the incarnating soul / ego were forewarned of their venture into flesh would be successful on condition that they achieved it without merging themselves with the darkness of the body. Think about it. Without merging themselves totally in the darkness of the body. You know why? Because when they totally become submerged in the body and its mass takes over. The darkness begins to rule the light. That's just the way it is. So, they were to make a magnetic connection with the body, physical body, by means of a linkage of their currents of higher life with the forces playing through the nervous system of the human being. And again, this is what I talk about so much, is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Focus on the tree of knowledge. That's what we have been taken away from for 1,700 years through the Roman Church. They do not want us to know, period. That's why they want us to think that the inferno is hot when actually it's cold. It's frigid, it's frozen. It's opposite. So, they were thus to be in position to pour down streams of vital power into the body, but were not to sink their total quantum of divine intellectual intellection into the sense life or the ego of the body. They were to hover over the physical life of the body, touch it with a divine flame, but not draw down into it. To fall into this dereliction would be sin. That's what sin would be. To lose a measure of their vital life and eventually to die. And again, in this book, Kuhn does a tremendous work on die, death, and dead. And to show that those are actually code words that don't mean what you think that they mean. They don't mean what we think that they mean, what that we've been taught. For there were always two deaths spoken of in the books of the past. It was the death in the first place for them to come under the heavy depression of fleshly existence. So what he's saying is for the soul spirit to actually come in here, that was a death. To who? To God.
Yeah.
That death was not death as in cessation, it was surrender. It was to surrender its powers, its abilities, its intellect to a lesser. The greater surrendered to the lesser. Not to stay submitted under the lesser, but so that in that housing of the lesser it could awaken, it could be awakened. And that's why the mythologies, you see the stories of Jesus is asleep in the boat. You see these stories. And that's what they're about. For there were always two deaths spoken of in the books of the past. It was the death first placed of them to come under the heavy depression of the fleshly existence. This was the first death. But to sink further down and to be lost in the murks of the human sensationalism to the degree that they made a return to their heavenly state next to impossible. You hear that? What happens with that? That's where people have just gone on and on and on. And what takes over is habits. We become so habitual. Now the habit has so deeply buried. Now habits can be broken. Some of them takes until about a year about death to break, but they can be broken. So he says this was the first death, but to sink far down to be lost in the murks of the human sensualism to the degree that made a return to their heavenly state next to impossible was a suffering the second death, of which soul ego ever stood in and terror in the old text. The first death was incarnation. The second was the failure to rise and return to the source. So what happens in that? Well, generally what happens in that situation, they decease in that body, in that incarnation. Somehow or another, whether it's because of the weight and they commit suicide or they get killed or whatever happens because of that. And then they come back again in order to do it again. To rise above that. Okay. Now, let me read you this. The plunge into carnality that brought death over all of our woe to the soul brought life to the lower man. Think about it. If the only way that you could experience life was for God to come and experience death.
Right.
But it's not death as in cessation of being. It was just as in submission to a lower state of being. That was part of the soul ego's purpose. The gods, or the Elohim, came to die that we as mortals might live. They came that both they and we might have life more abundantly. I like that because it fits really well right there. That's why the Elohim, the gods, came is so that they, the gods, and we can have that life and have it more abundantly. If that happens through our awakening, that happens through us beginning to know myself. By knowing myself, I know the power of whence I came and what I am. Okay. That life and death, let's see. Where was that one? They came that the mortals might live, that they came that both they and we might have life more abundantly. But at what cost to themselves? A lone walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Theirs was the death of the cross of flesh and matter. See, that's what this cross represents, the flesh and matter, the material manifest world. The use of the term death must be in any case a comparative one, for there strictly is no death in the form of total extinction of being for any part of real being. All death, so called, is but a transition from state to state, a change of forms of that which is and cannot cease to be. Air lives the death of water. Fire lives the death of air, and so on. So body lives the death of the soul, and soul lives the death of the body. It thrives by virtue of that death. The germ and the young shoot of any seed live the death of the body of the seed. And anyone who's ever gardened, it don't matter if you plant flowers, you planted anything. I don't know if, it's just simply there. Anybody can see it. The seed didn't really die. That's a metaphor we give. The seed gave form to a different life that come up out of that seed.
That's right.
That's why they say that the seed must die. What is it doing? It's yielding itself. It becomes the very, very vital life force of that which is pushing out of itself.
Right.
It's just exactly like Mama. When she pushed you out, you died to her, but you didn't. You become the very life of her. That's why there's that attachment. That's why there's that. Those stories are so beautiful once we begin to grab them and we begin to see the greater picture of them.
In essence, wouldn't we become, or aren't we in the process of becoming Elohim?
Oh, absolutely, yes. That's exactly what it's about. We are in that process of becoming the Elohim.
What we were taught was the fall of man was actually the fall of God into this lesser dimension, that through his fall into us, he would raise us back up to where we were.
And how does he done that? How does he done that? How does he do that? He does that in us awakening to our true natures. In that aphorism, it's all in that aphorism. Know yourself.
Hallelujah.
What am I getting to know? I'm not getting to know my carnal, egoic Lynn. No, I'm getting to know my divine Elohim. I'm getting to know that I am a little G. I'm a drop of the big G. I am of the big G's essence. I'm not all that it is, other than I'm only a speck of all that it is. But in my speck, I draw from all that it is.
Yes.
Wow, if we awaken to that, then I realize there's never a time when I'm powerless.
Yes.
I'm always powerful.
We're not the quantity of it, but we're the quality of it.
Yes. So y'all have to get this book. I hope that y'all make this a part of your library if you haven't. Because this, I can just go on and on forever out of this book.
Basically what it is God is submitting himself to the matter in the process of creation.
Yes.
Of man.
Yes. Submitted and committed.
Yes.
Till death do us part.
Right.
He'll never leave you. He'll never forsake you. It's there always. Completely married and merged as one.
Right.
That's what Genesis 2 is all about. What God joined together. Man cannot put us under. You can't divide it.
Until the matter becomes dust again, you never part anyway.
Then your process goes all over. All right, man on earth is an epitome of the zodiacal or heavenly man. That's what I want to start next to show you. The zodiac or the heavenly man. And the zodiac has depths of meaning for the mind of man that are still unfathomable.
Yes.
In other words, this thing just don't end. You as you begin to look at what we talked about this morning, you begin to look at your cross and you begin to dig into the depths of your being, it will just get deeper and deeper and deeper for you. That's why this year, this is a year to really get serious about knowing you. Know yourself.
Yes.
So the 12 signs, the 4 quarters, the 24 elders. Now listen to this. The 12 signs. That's the 12 zodiacal. I'm just going to have to put that back. I got to. Let me do it real quickly here. The 12 signs. And I want you to watch this, and you'll hear it. You'll hear everything that we talked about. This is layer on layer on layer. Now listen to this. The 12 signs. That's the Elohim. Aries, right on around back to Pisces. All 12 of those signs. That's Aries, around to Pisces. The 4 quarters. That's the Yod, He, Vav, He. We did that this morning. Remember? The 24 elders. That's each hour. This is a 12-hour day, 12-hour night. That's why your clock. The 24 elders sitting around the throne up here. So you have to grasp this. This is all beautiful, beautiful astrological science. The 24 elders, the 30 regents, the 36 rulers. 36 rulers. So in each sign, you have 3 decans.
Yeah.
3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 12. That's the 36 rulers. They're all there. The 36, the 72 messengers. You remember this morning we talked about that 1 degree that moves every 70 years, every 72 years. The 72 messengers. The other material divisions have each their special significance in the total of 12 times 30 degrees. All of these are prominent throughout the Bible to mystify and to mystify the unenlightened. Of particular illumination to the mind is the study of the 4 corners, those Yod, He, Vav, He, that we talked about this morning. The points where the 4 arms of the cross in the circle intersect the circumference. That is, at the 2 solstices and the 2 equinoxes. The story of mankind, collectively and individually, is both concealed and revealed in the recondite significance of these 4 poles. The story will remain sealed in dark unintelligibility until the 4 cardinal points of the zodiac are seen to denote 4 critical epochs in the life of the evolving man. In other words, until they reach a place in you that you realize, oh, wait a minute, this is me, in the evolving man. Namely, his entry into the 4 places of consciousness. And here they are: sensation, emotion, thought, and spiritual intuition. On and over which his life of awareness extends. Any life cycle exhibits these 4 turning points so that the zodiacal chart will be seen to be a key to living process universally. And of course, Kuhn goes down and he begins to give you the life and the nature processes of these, and you'll see these different things in his chart in your own self. So I ain't got time to put all them. We put some of that on the board this morning under earth, air, fire, and water, and how you fit, where you come under each one, north, south, east, and west, and so on. Okay, one last thing here, Kuhn. Let me just get this, and then we'll finish up. We'll tidy this up. Near the end of November 1932, the public press reported the announcement of Dr. George W. Creel, noted scientist of the Cleveland laboratories, that he had discovered in the heart of every cell a protoplasm tiny center of foci of energy, which he called hot points. are radio genes, which estimated temperatures from 3,000 to 6,000 degrees of heat. Protoplasm emitted radiations of various wavelengths, some as powerful as those emitted by the sun. The sun shines in the protoplasm of animals, plants, and therefore animals and plants can confer on atoms chemical affinities such as are conferred by the sun. Who would think that there are hot points in the human or in animals on the order of the temperature of the surface of the sun? If one could look into the protoplasm with an eye capable of infinite magnification, one might expect to see the radio genes spaced like stars as suns in infinite miniature. Without exaggeration, the concept may be taken to mean that within every flesh of man burns the fierce fire of the sun, and that within every man's body glow infinitely small counterparts of the stars.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's what he said. And this is an article that you can actually get a hold of if you want to. It's from a New York Times, November the 25th, 1932. Now, one is permitted to wonder what would be the amazement of Dr. Creel and his fellow moderns if it was shown to them that in the old books of the Rosicrucians, some books published as late as 1892, the following brief sentence has stood in the silence of scientific scorn for 70 years when he wrote this in 1940. So that would be 130 or 40 years from now. And here's what it was. Here's what the Rosicrucians wrote. Every man has a little spark of the sun in his own bosom. A spark of the original light is supposed to remain deep down in the interior of every atom. That's the true, that's for every person. I don't care who you are. That's every one of us. We have that speck of the sun inside us, the soul and the spirit, that life and that energy. I wanted to do this to the, let me put my little character right here. Okay, and I'm doing that for his, that's his pelvic, so that he gets the balance of walk. That's his feet. You remember the story in Genesis chapter 3? It says that this energy had bruised the head, but it would be under the feet. That was referring to the head and the feet coming together in this wheel. In that passage in Genesis is where that's at. So I wanted to give you these. You'll find, each one of you, as you study or you finally do your charts, your astrological charts, there are two old schools of thought for the seven. This represents right here the torso that we put up on the board. From your sex organ to the top of your head represents the seven endocrine glands, the seven seals, the seven golden candlestick, the seven rainbows. Anywhere in Scripture where you have the story of seven, the 7 days, 7 yoms, facets of life, etc., etc., all will refer to this from the sex organ to the top of your head, that part of the physical body. And so when you look at any astrological chart, which y'all brought several little books, if you look at them little books, you're going to see this is the same in all of them. It doesn't matter where you go. It's the same. It's the same chart. The organs fit in the same places. And so when you look and you begin to see your wheel, where you're at, you begin to look at your wheel, you begin to know more about yourself. And I make this statement because I'm right here. My feet bother me sometimes simply because that's where I am as a Aquarium Piscean. My feet have always bothered me, and yours may be too. You might be born right here and still have a problem with your feet. Could be a lot of different reasons for that, I don't know. But you'll find that when you start to study this chart, you'll find the different parts of your being by knowing the different locations of what's where. When you know that the ram, Aries, always refers up to the upper brain, the head. Taurus always refers to the lower brain, the neck, the shoulders. It's where the bull, that's why it's called that, because bless God, Taurians, I'll do it. I muscle through it. And Gemini, the twins, are working through that. Cancer, the lung, the heart. Leo, the lung, the breath. Leo, the heart. Virgo, the womb, the place of birthing. And Libra, the pelvic. That's what the whole structure stands on this. This is the foundation of the whole physical structure. You have two pedestals that give you mobility, but that pelvic bone is very important. It's called the scales of justice. Should be just basically meted out as the scales of balance, to learn to balance. And not to, we think we get justice when we judge somebody. But what could be better than to find someone who has a weakness or a place where they make an error, mistake after mistake after mistake, and we call it wrong, we call it bad, we call it evil, they did. But yet there's something out of balance in them. If you could move something or change something or say something to bring them into a place of balance, change their whole life. That's true judgment. Yeah. That's balance. That's what balance is. So, and I used to wonder how they built this phenomenal wisdom and truth without the telescope. Actually, they didn't have to have the telescope, because they can, and you and I can too, with the naked eye, can really begin to see this mythology in the stars and the skies. We can see it at night on clear nights in all the places where we live. Some places on the globe you can't see it, but you'll always see these. I'll give you the 7 of them: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn can be seen with the literal eye. So, but those are the 7 planets. And it seems like they've added another planet or two, haven't they? In the last 100 years, yeah. I think they have, with the telescopes, they've veered way out. And I think they have named off another one or two. I'm not sure. But I know Uranus and Neptune has to be seen through a real powerful telescope. So here are those are the 7 planets, and those 7 planets fit in this wheel. Yeah. And they'll fit in different places in this wheel. Okay. And then here are the 7 that the mythologies are always born from. The ancient mythologies always used the sun as a planet, and it always used the moon as a planet. And the reason it did was because both the sun and the moon both are in orbit, and they are all in the wheel. So they used those 2, and then they used Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And so to find out where these are located, because the sun is a ruler, and that's basically what it is. The sun was always in the sign of Leo. So I basically could put the sun right there. It was always considered in the sign of Leo. So if you were born with a Leo, whether it's an ascendant or a descendant part of your sign, you can find there's a whole lot more energy. You have the energy. You have the energy of the sun. Mm-hmm. The moon, in all of the ancient mythologies, was always in Cancer. These colors are the same here. The moon was always in Cancer. Okay. chart, you'll know. Okay, Mercury is always in Gemini. So if you're in Gemini, I think just about every one of us here had something in Gemini, the twins. Mercury is the ruling planet for that sign. Mercury, Gemini. And then Venus for Taurus. And then Mars is always what, fiery, hot. So what you'll find with the Aryans, you're going to find that fire, that they're real fiery. You know.
I made some copies of what you're saying out of Barbara's book.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I did not know that. Okay, is that in your book?
yeah, and the book also defines each one according to the,
Okay.
you know, planet.
Okay. And so that these are not left out, these other planets are not, these other astrological signs aren't left off. You'll have Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn will also carry, they will also carry over into these other different signs of Virgo, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Pisces. Is that how yours does it too?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And it tells you how Mars affects Gemini, how Mars affects Cancer.
Perfect, perfect. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
That book right there would, see, I'm just drawing from different pieces of material
Yeah.
that I've got, not from any particular book, so there's
That's a
probably plenty of
beginner's
good
book.
books. This one?
Yeah, the Beginner's Guide to Astrology.
I mean, I've never read it, so I don't, you know, but the stuff you're saying, same thing as this research I've got.
Yeah, it breaks down everything and tells you what is it, little what do you call them, drones? Decons.
Yeah.
It tells you what they really are.
Okay.
And it breaks
Breaks each
every
one?
part of the
Okay, see,
astrology circle.
What I would encourage you to do, rather than to try to engulf that whole book or that idea,
Right.
is just take your cross, your cardinal signs. Work on them. Just work on the ones that affect you. Like Beverly, you're gonna have to work double hard because me and you are split. You got to do. You're gonna wind up with some of the Leo and some of the Virgo, just like I am. Some of the Pisces, some of the Aquarius. You got to, wherever you're at,
Yeah,
it'll fit. It'll work for you. And study that and begin to get to know that. Begin to get to know this is yourself.
you know, I was looking at that on the December 21st and the March 21st, those 4 major points, and how the Native Americans refer to their wheel as north, south, east, and west. That's how they break down their wheel in 4 major points, which would be the north is on the top.
Yeah, this is the north.
Yeah, and then the
This is
east,
the south. This is the east.
yeah,
And this is the west.
yeah. I guess they all have the same scenario, really.
They do.
Only yeah.
They do. Yeah, they all have every one of them.
Is it, oh, I'm sorry. Is it feasible to say that as the planets move around, you know, that planet affecting in that area is parts of what affects us on a daily
Yes,
way?
absolutely. Exactly. Simply because of what you
Yeah.
said. It's not necessarily because the earth is, the sun is moving or because the earth is moving, because everything's moving.
Moving, yeah.
Everything is moving. And so it's constantly changing. But what I'm looking at, or what I'm talking about, when you stationary the chart,
Yeah,
is to find your birth position
Right.
in it. That's all that's
Right.
about. Find your birth position in it, because you're affected by the whole thing all the time.
right, right.
But finding my birth position in it like me, then I begin to look at these. This is what I'm using this word branded me. Imprint,
Yeah.
maybe enneagram, maybe something like that. You know, scarred. Sounds terrible. I'm scarred. God scarred me, but that's a good thing. Marked. I'm marked. I'm marked. Everybody has that.
Yeah.
And to know that's to know yourself. So even when you're moving through these different places of energy, and we always do, we do every day, move in and out. Just because it's cloudy don't mean the sun ain't out.
That is true, very true.
You see, it's just like if you watch Dr. Jack Kruse. I do highly recommend you check out Dr. Jack Kruse. If you watch Jack Kruse, he gets out in that morning sun. He don't care if it's cloudy or if it's not cloudy. It's still there. The sun still emanates that energy. The only difference with a cloudy day and a non-cloudy day would be the effect on your pineal gland. To gaze into the sun through your eyes early in the morning, short intervals of time, is extremely good for your pineal gland. It helps to open the pineal gland, to life the pineal gland. So I highly recommend that. But Dr. Jack Kruse, he does too.
In the scripture, take up your cross. I think if you look that up, it would say it needs to uproot, lift up. So this is, the whole wheel is the image of God that we're created in.
Yes.
So we are to uproot or take out or separate from that wheel where we started on the wheel, and the energies that affect us, like our cross, I call it our helpmeet, like a cross from you, that's taking your place in the wheel. And to me, that uprooting it is to lift it out of the whole wheel and see where you need your balances to start. And when you get your balance, yourself balanced with your birth sign, your cross sign, and with your conceivement sign and all that, then that begins to, like I'm seeing it now, it begins to take the wobble out of this wheel where it's been so unbalanced in our lives, and it just becomes a balanced thing, and it will begin to manifest the image of that God that we were created in.
Excellent. Excellent, I agree.
That's good.
Have you found that you have weaknesses? Have you ever found that there's some areas that, or maybe you haven't ignored it and would rather not talk about it or admit it? They're there. That's a part of the balancing of your cross, is to find that. Not to shun it or to run from it. It's an asset of who you are. It's not a bad thing. It's just, and actually that you feel you're weak in becomes your strength when we surrender.
Yeah.
Surrendering to it is the biggest deal, and I use that one about the person pulling out in front of you because that's just a common analogy today. That gets under the skin of most everybody. I know it does, but except me. That's a lie.
We know, preacher.
You can't leave where you are until you admit you're there.
Amen.
So the truth of having the truth of our weaknesses is what frees us from them and brings more balance.
That's true.
It's humbling. It's humbling, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And when Paul was talking about that, when I'm weak, I'm strong, or when I'm strong, I'm weak. There's a tremendous truth that's in it. Surrendering to the whole of my being brings a balance to the all of my being. So